Hi guys, it's Dr. Pete here. I'm a workplace psychologist working with school leaders and their teams to build high-performance schools, places where every student and every staff member can flourish. In this special video, I want to have a look at the restarting of Australian schools in particular post-COVID-19 and focus in on how we can recover from this, but also see it as an opportunity to continue transformation. So let's put the COVID-19 crisis in context, particularly for education. I love the quote from Professor Deborah Jules Sherman, who said, "This is the greatest ever all-time challenge for school leadership." And that's a massive statement to consider, that we've lived through a history, a phase that is the greatest ever global challenge for schools. But it's not just schools that have been impacted by COVID-19. There's a personal impact to consider here too. As a psychologist, I know about what we call stressful life events. Different impacts happen to us, and they're, in the COVID-19 case, it's cumulative, it's stacking up. We call stressful life events like waves of life as a simple metaphor, and you have small waves, big waves, and tsunamis, wipeout events. The COVID-19 situation is a series of tsunamis stacked on top of one another: work, home, health, finances, parenting, relationships. So many crises on top of us all at once. So that leads to the question, how have we been coping with this? Now, when we think about coping with stressful life events, there's two different words to consider. The first one is about distress, and the second one is about dysfunction. Distress, of course, is our frustration, symptoms of stress, being angry, being sad, being anxious. Whereas dysfunction is a completely different construct. That's about when we're no longer able to do things properly. And of course, when we think about the COVID-19 situation, everyone to some degree is distressed. So the more important question, what's been the impact of this in terms of how many of us have become dysfunctional through the process? We can look at that by having a look at the pulse data we have. One of the things we do in our research is every week continue to track and measure how staff are going in schools and also how students are going. Let's start with the staff. We want to look at collective teacher efficacy, and in particular March 2020 and April 2020 collective teacher efficacy data. You can see on the screen that we've actually been going quite well, surprisingly. The orange line, of course, is what a typical year is, and the blue line represents where we're at. That suggests that we're not dysfunctional as such, even though it's understandable we may be distressed. If you look at the next slide, you can see the splits across secondary, primary, and special education in Australia. And you can see the secondary schools are doing really well. The primary schools are understandably sitting in some lower collective efficacy. And again, the special schools appear to be holding up really well in this crisis. If we look at student self-efficacy, another really important construct, we've got some data emerging there to say that students are actually doing well. Some year levels in the high school settings where we get this data, some year levels are doing better than others, but their actual underlying work completion and learning data is strong, and that suggests we may be distressed as staff and students, but we're not as a group. We're not dysfunctional, we're resilient, and we're in good shape given what's just happened. So given we know our underlying collective efficacy is strong in both staff and our student self-efficacy is strong in students, we can think about this restarting, recovery, and transforming phase that we're into now. And the thing we want to put to you there is to concentrate on capacity more than capability. We need to build capacity. That's the thing we want to do. And when I think about building capacity in our staff and students, I like the analogy of the fuel and the tank. The tank, of course, is the systems and processes that we use to guide our ways of working. And we can think about all the innovative ideas that we put into play to get through the crisis and ask the question, how useful are these moving into recovery? The fuel, of course, that's the activity cycles and the what, when, and who of getting along in the school and being a high-performance team. So putting this together as we recover. Remember, we also want to continue the journey of transforming, and all of the systems and processes that we innovated through the crisis to build capacity to cope with all the stressors. We need to think about those things, those clarifications of role and structure, workflow maps, allocations, use of technology, the way we organize and share information online. How do we bring all the good bits of that into the recovery phase to keep transforming our schools? We also want to think about the activity cycles of the crisis, the way we dialed in and used Zoom and checked in on one another more frequently, and how do we take the good bits of that and bring that into the recovery transformation phase as we restart our schools. Remember, the focus needs to be on high capacity, because high capacity equals collective efficacy. So there's some ideas to consider, and a big congratulations to everyone for staying so strong and resilient through such a monumental challenge. And remember, recovery is about continuing to transform. And I look forward to catching up with you soon. Thanks.